So hi everyone, and welcome today for What's Next After Practice, our first event in the Career Paths with Coopman series. My name is Glen Hastings, for those of you that don't know me, and I'm a senior consultant here at Coopman Search and Selection. We have an excellent event in store for you today, and I'm eager to get started. But before I do, I just want to quickly share with you a bit of a background as to why we're all here. Coopman is a specialist financial services recruitment company operating internationally for accounting, finance, risk, and compliance opportunities on a permanent and interim basis. We work at the qualified level right through to the executive level, and we aim to provide an engaging service and get to know the people we work with. Through a regular engagement with professionals in the industry, we come to understand the challenges our network encounter, and we aim to provide valuable solutions through events like today, our podcasts, articles, and industry reports. So I myself actually started my career with Deloitte in Luxembourg. I was auditing investment funds for almost 3 years. Over in Luxembourg, I got the opportunity to complete my ACCA exams. And like many of you today in our audience, I was unsure, of my next career move. One thing I knew was that I enjoyed connecting with people, so I decided to take a different route and move into recruitment. After Luxembourg, I spent some time in Toronto working with Robert Half and then joined Coopman when I returned to Ireland. So recently, over the past number of weeks and months, I've been speaking with a lot of newly qualified professionals in the Dublin market. And I noticed that they too have the same questions I had when I finished with Deloitte. What type of role do I want? Do I want to do audit or financial reporting or advisory? What type of company is right for me? Or even what sector do I want to work in? So I think today's event is designed to answer some of those questions and to provide more clarity on the career paths that are available to newly qualifieds as they look to take the next step professionally. We have 3 excellent speakers lined up for you, each completing their training contract with a Big Four and then specializing in a different area upon entering the industry. So their insights and advice will certainly be very useful to you in the coming weeks. But before I introduce you, I want to highlight that the panel discussion will last for about 40 minutes, after which we will open the floor for a 10-minute Q&A. If you have any questions throughout the event, please do put them in the chat, and we will address them at the end. For any questions that we do not get to cover, we will try to follow up directly after the event, and I'm also more than happy to have a post-event call with anyone who would like to further discuss their career options. So what I'd like to do now is just introduce our panel. Firstly, Caoimhe OhOgartaigh. Caoimhe is a member of the Association of Chartered Certified Accountants. After completing her training contract with Deloitte, she joined IFS, a State Street company in the financial reporting department. In December 2016, she joined the internal audit function in VHI. Caoimhe also has a diploma in strategic finance and data analytics. Our next speaker is Morgan Sheehy. Morgan is a vice president for Walker's Professional Services. He has significant experience in the provision of accounting and tax compliance services to the SPV corporate services industry. Morgan leads the provision of accounting and tax compliance services to a wide range of capital markets and aircraft finance SPVs. Morgan also serves as a director on the board of Irish Special Purpose Vehicles. And finally, we have Niamh Tobin from EY. Niamh is a senior manager within the CFO Advisory team, specializing in the aviation finance. She also worked with EY since joining as a graduate in 2011, advising clients both locally and internationally. Niamh has provided accounting, advisory, transaction support to a range of clients within the aviation finance sector, including lessors, airlines, and manufacturers. So thank you again very much to our panel for joining me today. Hope you're all keeping very well. It's definitely great to see you. And moving on with today's discussion, what I'd like to do is, give the first question to Niamh. Niamh, if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your career path in the CFO Advisory and making that transition from audit into a more commercial consulting role, which you're currently in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks very much, Glenn, for the introduction, and good afternoon, everyone. So for me, as Glenn mentioned, I did my training contract with EY, and I worked primarily in the aircraft leasing department, which also actually included a ship leasing client, which was very interesting. Throughout my training contract, I had excellent exposure to senior management, which I really enjoyed, and it helped my development. I was afforded plenty of opportunities, to travel. I was always challenged by new clients, different structures, and then I did some kind of capital markets work as well, which kind of changed things up for me. I would say, I suppose, finally one of those opportunities is what led me down the path to join a CFO advisory team in the EY Sydney office.
Great. Actually, in my time in Deloitte, I got the opportunity to do a 6 months secondment on their advisory team as well, which I thought was great. Broadened my skill set, showed me what other opportunities I could have within practice too. More so moving away from audit, which I think is very valuable and definitely something worth checking out before you think you're fully ready to leave. Niamh, would you mind give some examples of some of those opportunities you had while remaining in practice, after your training contract and leaving audit, for instance?
Yeah, absolutely, Glen. I suppose for me, I was always looking for the next thing. When I finished, I did all of my exams, the CAP 1, CAP 2s and FEs. So, there was always a bit of a break every summer. And now that I coming out of the training contract, I was thinking, well, I need to do something a bit different every time to kind of break it up. So, I did a 3-month secondment to the EY Madrid office, which was really, really cool. I worked in a bank for the first time and had to work through Spanish. So that was a real challenge, even though I had studied it in university. Then the following year, I spent a number of weeks in Athens, in Greece, doing a corporate social responsibility program. So there I worked for a water desalination company. So again, like completely different. I was kind of seconded to that company, not working with EY at all. So again, a kind of a big challenge. I spent some time in our India office, training our aviation finance department there and kind of upskilling that team. So again, really, really cool and great to kind of work with a different culture. And then I suppose it was in 2018 when I made the move to Sydney. So I joined the EY Sydney office. I joined their FAS team there. And it was a really, really good experience. It kind of, you're moving to a new team, a new country, a different department. So while you're working with the same firm, you have a lot of new challenges. You have to prove yourself all over again. Aircraft leasing is very specific to Ireland, so there's different industries to learn about. I worked in healthcare, in transport, and then I saw the other side of aviation finance when I worked on a project for one of the Australian airlines. So I suppose then I moved back to EY Dublin in 2019, and it was then that I joined the kind of newly established financial services CFO advisory team here.
Great. And I think it's important to find your niche, as you did in aircraft leasing. And I'd actually like to, stay within that aircraft leasing space. And Morgan, if you don't mind, talk with us about your transition from KPMG audit to a more technical accounting role in the aircraft leasing sector, which, is very different to the advisory aircraft leasing work that Niamh would probably do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, my story is kind of, so I had the audit background for aircraft leasing and hedge funds, and then I was thinking at the time, at the end of my training contract, what kind of do I want to do for the next step? And I knew I wanted to do some sort of practical bookkeeping role. So the background I had in investment funds and aircraft leasing, I kind of didn't really see myself going into a fund accounting type role at that stage. So that left me with the aircraft leasing industry. So that's where I looked for a role in aircraft leasing, and ended up going into a smallish lessor called Republic Financial Corporation, just to get really good practical bookkeeping experience, having done a lot on the audit side. So that worked quite well, because I think once you have that knowledge from audit, be it industry specific or not specific, you're looking for that next step. The bookkeeping and the general ledger type accounting is kind of what you want to get into, because so most of the time in the Big Four you wouldn't be doing any accounts prep or anything like that. So that next move, I actually got exactly what I needed. It was full kind of start to finish accounting, full general ledger responsibility, all the kind of small journal type stuff, all the way up to the really important stuff around depreciation and impairment. So it was the full kind of suite of accounting for a company. So it worked out quite well. And I think you know, if I think back to like my first few days in that company, it was a bit daunting kind of looking at an accounting system, having never seen one before. Obviously I'd done the exams and I knew all my journal entries and that kind of stuff. But when you go into actually do it for real, it's kind of an odd experience. But once you get up to speed on the actual system, your knowledge that you have built up through audit and through your exams kind of comes into, you can kind of use it very practically, and it's kind of a smooth transition. So that was kind of how that came about.
Yeah, I think you definitely get a great foundation, you know, beginning in an audit background, exposure to the financial statements, the different standards, and even as new ones get implemented. And you had a great point there of, you know, even, you know, joining as a financial accountant in a smaller place, because I guess it's less overwhelming. You're working closely with a mentor who can really kind of show you the ropes, and with that transition, it's a little smoother, which I think can be very valuable.
Yeah, I think one of the things that can happen, and what I see a lot of people, you know, thinking about, is that if you go into industry after practice, in a big company, or if, you know, something whereby you're not doing all of the accounting for a company, you're doing a bit of it. So you're doing the debtors or the creditors or something like that. I was quite conscious of, I don't want to get into that because I want to see what the whole GL is about. So, and I, you know, okay, then maybe you might specialize in certain areas around financial accounting, financial reporting. In big banks, they have very large departments. So that's something that maybe people can progress to. But I think certainly for myself at that stage, I wanted to get the whole company accounting, the whole kind of GL type 360-degree view. And yeah, it was just a small department, so myself and a financial controller. So it was very hands-on training. So it worked quite well.
Oh, I can imagine. Definitely propels you and shows you just definitely far more areas that you would have in a different area. And you know, as you just kind of mentioned there, you know, you're in with Walkers now, but before you made that move, it wasn't a direct route. So if you don't mind just speaking to me about that career path as a whole.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I spent about 2 years in the aircraft leasing company, and then I'd kind of done everything. I'd kind of learned as much as I thought I could in that area, and I then moved into corporate services with TMF. So it's basically providing that financial accounting and reporting function, but on an outsourced basis for a whole wide range of aircraft leasing and then other structured finance SPVs. So I like the idea of going back into kind of a client-facing role, because in the internal role in the leasing company, you're kind of reporting upwards to management, and that's fine, and it's part of the process. But I like the idea of the output of the accounting being the actual product that you're selling. So that's essentially what corporate services is that you're, you know, providing financial accounting, reporting, management accounts, VAT returns for a list of clients on an outsourced basis. So I was with TMF for about 2 years, and I was an accounting manager there. And then I came on board with Walkers, which is another corporate service provider. So that's about 3 years ago now, 3.5, as the head of accounting. So the same idea as I would have been doing in TMF, but just a different set of clients, you know, a good split between aircraft leasing and other structured finance vehicles. And it's the exact same idea. It's using those kind of financial reporting and bookkeeping skills, but just providing that on an outsourced basis to a list of external clients. So that's really how I am where I am now.
Fantastic. And Caoimhe, I think it's great to have you in this discussion as well, because your career path is quite different, you know, to our other two panelists. You know, specifically, you made the move after the Big Four to a financial reporting role, and now into internal audit. Would you mind just kind of speaking to us a little bit about your career path?
Yeah, I suppose when I did my training contract with Deloitte and learned a lot there, but when it came to an end, I knew external audit at least wasn't for me. Right. So I thought the role for financial reporting came along, and I decided, because I knew I wanted to stay in accountancy, I thought that would be a good start to kind of figure out where I wanted to go. And like Morgan said, it was great from getting a much broader perspective, because I think reviewing accounts as an auditor is much different than actually preparing them. And even though I wasn't preparing the accounts, I was still working with the team that was, and working in between the auditors. So I was kind of a go-between between the business, and it gave me a much better, I suppose, perspective of my former clients when I was an auditor, but it helped me deal with auditors as well. So it was a great perspective, and it broadened my knowledge of funds, but it still wasn't quite the right fit for me. So after about just under 2 years at IFS, I ended up going out to the market, and the offer for internal audit in DHI came along. One of the things I had learned from financial reporting was that I loved working with a team and working with same people day in and day out. So it seemed like a good role. I knew nothing about insurance actually starting, despite having trained in FS as my career. It was purely funds and banking. So insurance is the one area I hadn't actually looked at in FS. So I thought at least I'd get my knowledge strengthened in that. And it actually turned out to be a really good fit for me, because it's quite different, internal audit and external audit, but it had a lot of the same kind of principles you pick up as an auditor: controls and risks, working with the team, working with different people, and having a variety of audits. But at the same time, it is quite, there's quite variety in the work, but at the same time, you're still working with the same people, you're still dealing with the same people, which suited me quite a bit. So it ended up being quite the area I found that suited me best.
Oh, no, I think that's very interesting, because I think for many people now, when they're planning to make a move, you can try out different roles and have different conversations to really understand what career path is for you, because I think sometimes a job spec may not fully illustrate what the role would be like, and experiencing different roles and just widening your skill set will really just help you understand what is the best role for you. So I think that is great. And I have another question for you, because when I speak to many newly qualifieds who are finishing their training contract, internal audit, may not be a preference. And I think that's partly due to being burned out from busy season and being unaware of what an internal auditor actually does. And I felt similar when I was leaving Deloitte, but it's only since I started speaking to internal audit professionals and I got to fully understand the career and how different the role is to external audit and the advantages it has for your career. Would you mind explaining to us and the audience the difference between internal audit and external audit?
Yeah, no, and that's actually a great question, because I know if you tell me when I was leaving external audit that I'd be an internal auditor 2 years later, I'd have thought you were crazy. It is something that people think, especially if they've done their training contract in external audit and they don't think it's for them, they don't think internal audit, but it's actually quite different. Like my time during when I was in Deloitte, a lot of it was focusing on the actual financial statements and maybe SOX controls, if you had those companies that required SOX controls. My internal audit career has been very different. I have looked at some financial reporting controls, but I've also looked at our claims department and how we assess our claims. Are we paying the right rates? I've looked at our administration. I've looked at our sales process and how we're actually even selling our insurance products to customers, how our reserves are calculated. I've even looked at our own strategy processes and carried out an audit on culture within DHI a few years back. And it's much more than just, it's much more on the operations of the company and the actual processes and risks and controls, not just the actual output. And it's a great way actually to learn a business, because I managed to see, one of the things I didn't like about external audit was I wasn't really seeing much outside the actual accounts we were signing off on. Internal audit, you get to know the business, you get to know how everything works. I can trace now if we're selling a product to say yourself, Glen, all the way to how your payments coming in, to how we're calculating it in our actual reserves, how we're deciding the product, how we're discussing it. And the great thing is you learn, you're dealing with people across the business, from the IT department, from our agents in the contact center to the guys on the board. It's a great way to get to know a business, to get to know how everything works in the individual areas. I rarely did the same audit twice. We were a small team, but we we really ended up being able to hit all the different areas. Like I said, even an audit on culture. I mean, you'd never think of auditors doing an audit on culture,
Right.
but I ended up actually doing one. I even went to do a training course on it to learn, and got to meet other people who were doing it, and it was quite interesting. And it really got me to know how other business areas worked. And I know a few of my other colleagues ended up moving from internal audit into other areas across the business because their internal audit skills had gotten them knowledge to spot areas that maybe needed improvement or needed certain processes brought in and projects brought in. So it's a great way to really kind of get to know a business beyond just what's actually in the books.
I can imagine, because you're just getting exposure to, like you've mentioned, all different areas. And I think one of the reasons, myself included, why I was looking to make the move out of external audit, perhaps the repetitiveness of different financial statements, but you get exposure, like you said, no audit is almost the same. It just keeps that interest and wanting to learn more and just to fully understand the business and how you can kind of bring it to the next level.
Yeah, like that's one of the key things I loved. I could actually see my recommendations being implemented into the business, so I could actually see the changes that were happening, and that had come around because of me in a way, which was great to see.
Absolutely. And I'd like to just kind of go back to Niamh actually now. I guess if we look at advisory again, because myself, from speaking with a lot of newly qualified accountants, they are seeking that commercial experience, and a lot of them they can have great opportunity again within practice. So Niamh, if you don't mind, what did you find to be the most rewarding when you made that move from audit to CFO advisory, and could potentially relate to a lot of our audience today who are listening?
A good question, Glen. Thank you. So I suppose what we do in CFO advisory, I would say, having that background in audit and that skill set, without, I suppose, realizing it, you have a lot of the soft skills that you need to work in CFO advisory. You have that mindset without, I suppose, realizing it, so that you can kind of understand what the client's pain points are. We're very solution orientated, which is obviously very rewarding. There's a lot of innovation and finance transformation being talked about now, so that's key on the CFO's agenda now. In a lot of the clients we're working with, so that makes it really, really interesting. And then I would say being able to work in the industry that I really enjoy. So again, aviation finance, and no two projects are the same. No client has the same problem, so that's really refreshing every time. As you said, in audit, where it's kind of set in stone, this is a lot more different. So there's huge variety in what we do, and then given our team, we work across so while I specialize in aviation finance, it's not the only thing I do, so it's a really good opportunity as well to learn different industries. So having no kind of insurance experience, I've worked on some insurance projects, so I had to kind of learn quickly, but there's people within our team who kind of support us there, and the same with banking. So it's really, really good. And as you said, it's a good opportunity to kind of stay within practice and get that kind of consulting experience.
Absolutely. Yeah. And obviously, as advisory is definitely in demand these days, going into a financial accountant role has always been a big demand for a lot of newly qualified making that move. And Morgan, I'd just like to again speak to you about that transition when you made that move from auditor to financial accountant. I guess the differences in the role and how you found that just transition overall.
Yeah, I think firstly, an audit background is a very good springboard for financial accounting. I think knowing what a good audit would look like and what you'd expect to see from a set of financial statements and all the backup, etc., that you need when you come and work on the other side of the fence, when you're preparing that. It's good to have that background knowledge of, okay, well, I have experience, like what would I expect to see if I was auditing this company? So seeing it from two sides, I think, is excellent preparation for, the evidence, etc., that you need to gather for different things around estimates and stuff like that. So I think it's a very good starting point. And I think from our own experience, we've had, very successful hires into our accounting team from an audit background, and people that have used those skills and kind of come up the curve within our team and are now doing very well and at a kind of managerial level. And I think it's kind of appreciating that, okay, you've got good technical accounting knowledge from your exams or from your audit experience, and okay, you don't have bookkeeping experience, but marrying those two together, like the bookkeeping is very much a practical skill that can be learned quickly. And I think it's important to just recognize that that's something that you'll have to, slowly become familiar with. But you have all the hard work, I suppose, done. You have all that knowledge in the background that you just need to draw on and bring it into a different realm. And I particularly think, we obviously prepare a lot of sets of financial statements, a lot of management accounts. We have a lot of audits with all the different audit firms around town. And the people that I've hired in that have that audit background, they kind of speak the audit language already. So it's just a very smooth transition once you get up to speed with the practicalities of bookkeeping, which isn't difficult, because it's just really applying knowledge that you already know, but just in a new way. So
yeah, because I think the combination of being familiar with financial statements, auditing, speaking with clients, liaising with central administrations, and then the combination of their studies from chartered accountancy exams, you have that knowledge there, and of course there's going to be a bit of a learning curve, but you have a great mentor, and then they kind of guide you along.
Yeah, and I think, and the other thing I find with the audit background is more of a kind of project and time management skills, which are obviously transferable across a lot of different areas. But on our side of the fence, we're in corporate services, we're preparing a lot of sets of financial statements, so and we're doing a lot of work in the background, and then we're kind of running all the projects from the other side of the fence. So those project management, time management, all those kind of skills are definitely transferable, and that's something that a lot of people in audit would have after having gone through the training contract. So again, that is just a secondary element that would be that with your technical accounting knowledge, and then bringing it all together with just kind of topping it off then with the bookkeeping knowledge that you can kind of learn on the job very quickly. It's a very smooth transition, I think.
Oh, great point. And Caoimhe, I'd like to ask you as well, because you had a similar experience to Morgan when essentially you made that switch from reviewing financial statements to then preparing financial statements when you joined State Street. How did you find it?
Definitely a bit of a learning curve. It is, like I said, it is very different reviewing financial statements to preparing. And I was on a team where about half of us were ex-auditors, and the other half had come straight in bookkeeping from the first day. So we had some interesting discussions when the auditors came knocking as to whether they were asking us for necessary items or not. But it was a great way to learn off each other, and it was great as well because you did get that more viewpoint and more rounded education, understanding how the preparation was done. And even though the funds I was working on, they were much more specialized than the standard funds I'd have been audited previously. So there was a few more kind of tricks that needed to be and points that needed to be in the statements that you wouldn't have in maybe a more standard fund a set of accounts. So learning those as well was a great way to expand the knowledge. And I also had to meet with our NAV team as well to get an understanding of where they were coming up with some of their points. So it was a great, even though I wasn't dealing with that hands-on myself, with my role, I was able to learn even a little bit from that end as well. So it was a great learning experience, if nothing else.
Absolutely. It's great that, the experience, the training contract that you get done in the 3 years, 3.5 years, it really just opens up so many doors, and you can just, experience different ones and have those conversations and see kind of which one is best for you. Just because advisory, again, is such a key area for newly qualified these days. Niamh, if you don't mind, if you could perhaps paint us a picture what life would be like for a newly qualified finishing their training contract in audit and making that move, and what the first 6 to 12 months could potentially look like when they're doing that switch.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to give an answer that most people won't like, and when I say it depends, but it really does, right? So as we kind of previously mentioned, advisory isn't the same as audit, where you don't have that structure. So at first I would say, be comfortable with that. There's going to be flexibility. The projects you work on are going to be different every time. You could join and be straight into a kind of a 6 to 12 month project with a certain client, or you could work on a number of different clients, kind of transactions, smaller projects. I work a huge amount on the transaction side. So there's a lot of cross service line working with the tax team, our kind of strategy team, and working kind of across our network. But I suppose what I will say is, regardless of what you're working on, that you are very well supported. You're never kind of set off by yourself to figure it out on your own. So we have a very, very kind of good support network. And then I suppose across EMEA as well, you get the opportunity to work with different countries, kind of learn from them. They often reach out to us with queries. We reach out to them to kind of make the best use of our network. But yeah, I would say it's very client facing, kind of solution orientated, and it's all about changing kind of your mindset from, maybe if you're coming from that audit background, to kind of having the CFO's agenda at the key of it, to kind of be what we call a kind of a trusted business advisor. So really, really enjoyable, and I would say there's loads of variety, and I would just, I suppose, say to be comfortable with that kind of change of not having that structured kind of portfolio of audit clients, and then asking as much questions or putting your hand up for as many different things as possible to kind of learn and grow as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah. I think it's nice when you're starting off, say in your first 2 years, to have some familiarity. You kind of know in an audit setting, certain clients you'll audit year by year, but then as you kind of grow and mature and look for more growth, to have, for no week to be the same or no project to be the same, that variation in your role just keeps you more interested. And I think as people develop over time, that's what they look for. And I think it's great to have that opportunity on offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Caoimhe, so what I'd like to do is, if you don't mind, if we could go back to 2013, when you were finishing your training contract with Deloitte. And I guess for our audience listening, if there's any advice you could potentially give now that you've learned along the way.
I suppose one is, don't underestimate what you already know. I know myself, I thought coming out, I didn't really know much compared to some of my colleagues. And I realized when I started doing other roles and that I actually had more in my audit experience than I realized. And I was able to apply that to my experience. I also learned a lot more from, say, financial reporting and internal audit. Right. I learned a lot from those. So everything can be a learning experience, even if you're in an area you don't necessarily think is right for you. You'll still be amazed with how much you can learn from that and how you can use what you've learned going forward. I'd also say, don't actually measure yourself against everyone else. Like, I know some of my colleagues, when we were finishing up, they knew exactly where they wanted to go, even if it was nowhere near audit or accountancy or anything else. They knew exactly what was in front of them, and I was really kind of just going, I'm fairly certain I want to do this, but I'm not entirely sure, or I'm not even sure what I want to specialize in and that. And as I said, I kind of fell into financial reporting and then fell into internal audit, but it worked for me, and it's actually what suits me. So don't be afraid to keep your mind open, and don't judge yourself against what everyone else is doing, because what's right for them isn't going to be right for you, and vice versa.
No, I think that's some very good points, because you learn along the way, and over time you find out what suits you best, and just getting exposure to different areas really just shows you what's not for you and what is for you. And Niamh, if you were to give us any advice, for those coming out of training contract, what would it be?
Yeah, I suppose similar to what Caoimhe just touched on, I would say, don't overthink it. It's a significant new chapter in your career. You've just finished your exams, you're newly qualified, you've just finished your training contract. The travel option mightn't be there anymore with COVID at the moment, but it's normal to, you know, think about other options, or if you're happy with what you're doing, you know, there's no shame in kind of staying where you are, learning a bit more. You know, some people stay for a year and then kind of look to move, and, you know, that's perfectly okay as well. Just, you know, I suppose the one thing I would say is continue to make sure that you're learning new things and having new challenges. Like if I look back over the kind of last 18 months since I've joined the CFO Advisory team, it's incredible when I think back about all I've learned over those 18 months. So it's about making sure that you continuously, I suppose, push yourself for new challenges, and, you know, don't stay doing the same thing, I would say. And then, you know, make sure you enjoy what you do. So yeah, I would just say don't overthink it, and make sure you kind of continue to challenge yourself, because it's the early stage of your career, and we have the energy to challenge ourselves. And then I suppose just to touch on that, Glen, and I'd like to add that on our CFO advisory team, we are actually currently recruiting for kind of newly qualified candidates as well. So if anyone does want to kind of find out a bit more detail about it, I'd be happy to talk about it.
Great stuff. Oh, it's some great wisdom there. And Morgan, I imagine you probably hear a lot of that. You probably have similar advice, and as you have newly qualified joining yourself in Walkers, would you agree with a lot of those points, and anything else to add?
Yeah, and I think, you know, when you're coming out of practice, you know, it's probably the first interview you've maybe done in a good few years, and I think it's important to not be afraid to really ask, excuse me, kind of, what are you going to be doing day to day, and does it actually match with what you want to do next? I think job specs can, with the best intentions in the world, sometimes be a bit vague, and I often, that's what we would normally do is get into a discussion when we're interviewing people and say, well, this is exactly what the role would be. This is where we see it going. These are the development opportunities. These are the growth pathway that we see over the next few years. And does that fit with what you're thinking? So have a think about, you know, firstly, read the job specs, but then go, okay, well, actually, what do I want to be doing day in, day out, week in, week out? You know, does this job give me new experiences or opportunities to do new things? Like Niamh and Caoimhe were saying, and kind of analyze it that way, because I think the last thing you want to do, and which is something we make sure doesn't happen in here, is that somebody comes in, they've done the interview, we've offered them the job, they come in, and then 2 weeks in, they're like, oh, this is totally different to what I thought.
Right.
No, that just can't happen. So I think use the interview process to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's something like, you know, depending on where you're going, the interviewer may not have that kind of focus. They might just think that you understand the job spec and you're on the same wavelength as them, when you might have a different interpretation of the bullet points, etc. So don't be afraid to kind of explore that in the interview itself. And that's something we do all the time.
That's some great advice there, I think. And I think that's the whole purpose of our discussion today, is really just to hear from people who began in the Big Four, went 3 different routes, and they can really listen to the advantages they had for their career and what you've kind of learned along the way. So it's great to hear from you guys. So what I'd like to do now is, I'm conscious of time, but before, I would like to take some questions we had from our audience, which would be just great to get your input on this. And one question that I get time and time again is how challenging it could be. Let's say you did a audit investment management background for 3.5 years, and you wanted to make that switch to insurance, for example, or to banking. And Caoimhe, I'd like to ask you first, because you didn't come from an insurance background yourself, but now you're in that space. And how challenging was that, or what did you face along the way?
It was a bit of a challenge, all right. Now, I had done a bit of banking experience, so a lot of, say, Solvency II and that I was familiar with. But it was a bit of a learning curve in terms of trying to understand certain terms, certain key things. What I did was I read previous audits in key areas. I asked my manager to give me a bit of a prep course, which they did, because they knew coming in I didn't have that insurance background. and I went through a few CPD courses just to get myself an understanding of kind of key things, things that were just run for a couple of hours by ACCA or Chartered Accountants Ireland, just to kind of get my knowledge up on what were the key regulations that I needed to know, the key points in that. And that was a great background to help get me more understanding of insurance.
Yeah. And I suppose to add to that, Glen, I would say, you know, myself, as I mentioned earlier, I've worked on some insurance projects while being on, since joining the CFO Advisory team. And again, I had no background in insurance at all, despite having a degree in insurance, but it was very different. But the technical terms, it was double Dutch to me. So similar to Caoimhe, I asked our insurance group to bring me through kind of what the main technical terms mean, like DAX and seeded DAX and all that, things like that just you've never come across before. So being able to use that network, and then as Caoimhe said, doing your own bit of research. So, read a few insurance company set of accounts or something like that to kind of familiarize yourself with it. But you'd be surprised at how quickly you pick up on it. But you're always, I would say, you're supported as well. So I wouldn't worry about that.
Great. And when I speak to a lot of newly qualified, aircraft leasing is definitely one of the most in demand, and Ireland is definitely at the epicenter, has such a domestic and international reach here. Morgan, would there be any advice you could give to newly qualified looking to get into that space who don't have that experience again? And
well, I think certainly from a corporate service provider perspective, I've hired people in with no leasing experience on the premise that they're going to be doing a lot of leasing accounting. Right. Now, what I look for there is that, do they have a good solid background in audit and a good general understanding of bookkeeping, etc., from the exams? I don't think it's necessary to have that industry background. The accounting for leasing isn't rocket science when we think about all the different IFRSs. And I've, kind of taught people how to do it, etc. So that's coming from the corporate service provider side. Right. I think some of the big lessors, I can't really speak for them, but I think they do tend to hire people that have that audit experience in practice. Now, I wouldn't say that that's the same for some of the small, medium-sized lessors. They want someone with good, solid bookkeeping and audit background. And then I think if you've got no industry experience, and I think it goes for anything when you're coming out of practice, I mean, the willingness to learn and saying, okay, well, I did my training contract in XYZ industry. I don't really want to get into that. Here's what I know, here's what I don't know, and I want to, launch into a new industry, and I'm willing to learn. I think people would, be positive about that. I think just being honest and upfront. I mean, you can do some background research. I think that wouldn't hurt, on the accounting standards and the industry in general. But certainly, from myself, we've hired in people very successfully. Some people with limited, they might have worked on one or two leasing clients, or they might have worked on one. They might have had some exposure when they were, a junior or semi-senior, and maybe not much after that. But I think it's more the attitude and the willingness to learn. With your audit background, I wouldn't worry about. I wouldn't see it as a barrier myself. So that'd be my perspective.
Great. I have two more questions now. So I have one now for Niamh. I guess as an auditor, how would they know if they're going to be a good consultant or an advisor, and just making that switch from audit to consulting?
Yeah. So I suppose it's if you enjoy kind of being client facing. Firstly, because what we do is hugely client facing. If you'd have a kind of solution orientated mind, because it's a real change from maybe the audit relationship to you're actually, they're picking up the phone because they have a problem and you need to help, they want you to help them solve it. So it's that change in relationship as well. And then if you're comfortable, I suppose, with the variety. So, a lot of people want structure. They want to know what their portfolio is. They want to know, this is my busy season, with consulting and, with advisory, it's all very project dependent. So something could blow up tomorrow and you're really, really busy, and it could go down again. And, it's just that kind of variety and being able to kind of go with the flow a little bit. So I would say they're the kind of three key points. to think about if you're thinking about a kind of a role in consulting or advisory.
Oh, that's very interesting. Interesting. And Caoimhe, we have a question from Ty. What would you recommend for someone who has finished their accounting exams and would like to possibly move more into a data analytics direction?
If you're thinking about internal audit, looking into data analytics is a pretty good move. A lot of internal audit and probably audit in general is moving much more towards data analytics. I was at the Institute of Internal Auditors conference there back in September, October, and it was all about data analytics. It's very much where the move is going. I had a couple of colleagues worked with, and they were fantastic with it. So they ended up trying to teach the rest of us who maybe didn't have the same background. Even if you don't have that much interest, probably having a general knowledge of even things like Excel. And that you'd be amazed actually how much Excel will actually support you, and people don't actually know how to use it. Excel and Word were the two key things I was working on, and even just learning little tricks like that. But yeah, if you're interested in data analytics, definitely internal audit is very much moving in that direction.
There you go. And I have one final question now, just which can be for all our panel. I guess, what do you each like most about your roles? Which I know you've probably alluded to earlier throughout our discussion, but it'd be good just to get, one or 2 points from all of you.
Yeah, I suppose for me, I love the kind of variety, as I kind of probably I've said a few times now, and being client facing. But I suppose what I enjoy most is the, compared to audit, you're kind of coming in when something is done, and then you're looking at it. Whereas with advisory, you're working with a client who might be going through a transaction, looking at maybe a new structure, and you're kind of trying to figure out the nuances and, the technical accounting aspect of how all of that flows, and to kind of at the end have a kind of a successful outcome, or to have it structured in a way that works for everyone from a tax perspective. You have all the different insights coming in and kind of working together. I would say that's probably very rewarding.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Great. So I know now we're kind of at that time of the year where it's busy season and audits are wrapping up and deadlines. So I'm conscious of everyone's busy schedules. What I would like to do is just thank you all very much for your time. And again, I'd like to just mention that there's some great opportunity over at EY on the CFO Advisory team, with Walker's that going through that financial accountant path, and then VHI as well, in different capacities, especially as Caoimhe mentioned, the internal audit option there is definitely great for your career. So I do hope today was great, just to provide clarity, provide information, and really just to share knowledge about the different career routes that are available when you do ultimately decide to leave an external audit background. Definitely some insightful and valuable advice. And what I'd like to do is just mention that it's important your next move, but it's also more important that you have these conversations, weigh up what's right for you, and over time and having these discussions, you'll find that your right career path. And what I'd also like to do for anyone, if they have any questions after this event, feel free to contact me at glen.hastings@coopman.ie, or feel free to visit our website at coopman.ie. Happy to speak about opportunities in the market, and also connect with Morgan, Niamh, and Caoimhe. It's just been some great advice. And for one more time, Niamh, Morgan, and Caoimhe, thank you so much today for your time, your insights, and your knowledge. And hopefully, once restrictions loosen up, we'll be able to grab a coffee. And the next time we see each other won't be virtually, it'll be in person.
Great. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thanks.